Thank you for joining this episode of our webinar series on best practices in e-discovery and digital forensics. In today's session, we turn the lens around and focus on the performance of law firms. With the massive changes due to the pandemic, employment trends, technology trends, and firm profitability are in the focus of today's session. My name is Jeff Fugitt. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Lexbe, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. We've got a ton of information to cover today, so I'll jump right in. Our webinars take place monthly and cover a variety of relevant e-discovery and digital forensic topics, trends, best practices, and strategies. We've got limited seating, so be sure to register early for the sessions that are of interest to you. If you have technical issues or questions, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com and we'll address them right away. Our webinars are available online at lexbe.com for viewing via streaming video or downloadable as a PDF presentation or MP3 podcast. You'll find this webinar and a complete listing of other webinars at lexbe.com and on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions during today's session, please enter them in the Q&A portion of the GoToWebinar console and we'll answer them after the event. To be notified of future live and on-demand events, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com or follow us on LinkedIn. For more than 17 years, Lexbe's been helping legal teams with limited resources handle document-intensive cases. We're the industry's most affordable and full-featured DIY cloud-based e-discovery platform. We're the industry's fastest e-discovery processing and document review platform. And this is important because being fast means you have the time you need to build a stronger case. We deliver the industry's fastest return on investment. And we're also rated as the e-discovery company that's the easiest to do business with, a high performer, and the easiest to administer. We also have a full forensic lab staffed with Cellebrite certified forensic investigators who perform full and targeted forensic collections and help boutique firms collect the evidence they need for their cases. We are also a Clio certified partner. If you'd like a demonstration of our platform, simply email us at sales@lexbe.com and we'll get that scheduled for you. Joining us today is Joshua Lenon. Joshua is the lawyer in residence and data protection officer at Clio. He has over 14 years of experience. He holds a JD in international law, a certificate in European Union law studies, a Bachelor of Arts, and a Bachelor of Science spanning English, composition, linguistics, and communications. Before I turn it over to Joshua, I'm going to ask for your participation in some polling questions to set the stage for his presentation. What percentage of your firm's IT has transitioned to cloud-based systems since the pandemic? And while you're answering that, I'd like to thank you for participating in our polling questions today. All right, I'll go ahead and close that poll. And our next question, are you planning on raising your hourly rates to keep up with inflation? Yes, no, not sure. All right, and our last polling question before I turn it over to Joshua. Are your clients wanting to reduce their legal spend due to recessionary pressures? Yes, no, or not sure. All right, and I'll go ahead and close that poll. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joshua Lenon. Joshua?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Insights from the 2022 Legal Trends Report. I'm going to be walking you through a data-driven deep dive into the LTR, as we call it internally, and how these amazing metrics can be used in your law firm. Let's dive into the 2022 Legal Trends Report. As Jeff told you, I'm Joshua Lenon, the lawyer in residence at Clio. That is a made-up title. And for the past decade, it's been my privilege to help research the intersection of the practice of law and technology, including contributing to each Legal Trends Report. Today, we're going to look at a couple of key things. First, an introduction to Clio and how Clio itself empowers the Legal Trends Report. Then we're going to talk about its data sources and some of our past conclusions. These are very important and lay the foundation of what we're going to be exploring later, which are our 2022 metrics, a desire by clients for alternative payment methods, We're going to take a look at who's winning in what we are calling the new work era and some takeaways that you can have. So to really understand the Legal Trends Report, you do have to understand Clio. We are a cloud-based offering of software specific to law firms, including Clio Manage, which is a case and practice management platform, Clio Grow, which is a client intake and legal customer relationship management or CRM software, and lastly, LawYacht, which is advanced document automation, including court forms from every state in the United States. Now, these are cloud-based, which means that Clio is providing the code and the infrastructure to run this software, but our customers can use it anywhere in the world. They have an internet connection, their desktop, their laptop, their mobile phone. They are able to access their law firm. And because of that access, we are able to create the Legal Trends Report. So we're going to be going over our 7th annual edition. I'm going to venture a guess and say that some of you are probably familiar with it, but we have been publishing and providing insight into the practice of law since 2016. And we have evolved the different questions that we research and the guidance that we've been sharing throughout each of these reports. And so I do recommend that if you have the time, you go back and look at these, because there's a lot of great insight and great guidance that you can be applying within your law firm. It changes in terms of what we focus on every year. But this year, I want you to focus on the 2022 report and all of those angles and questions that we've evolved up to at this point in time. So I've mentioned that Clio is a cloud-based practice management solution. And that means that the Legal Trends Report is in part based upon Clio app data. Now, I want to be very clear about what that means. It is the aggregated and anonymized data from tens of thousands of legal professionals in the United States. And specifically, it is not your case files and your communications and all of that confidential information that you store within Clio. Instead, this is based solely upon application data that tells us how law firms are using Clio. And the example that I like to give is that of billable hour. Within Clio, you are able to set a default billable hourly rate for your law firm, as well as case-specific, client-specific types of hourly fees as well. And what those tell us is that there is a bell curve of fees that are being set. Like, there's a hypothetical law firm that's setting a fee of $20 per hour. There's a hypothetical law firm that's setting a fee of $2,000 per hour. I don't know which firms these are. There are both contractual and technological barriers to allow me to see these. But I can see that there is a bell curve between them of how frequently certain hourly billing amounts are being set. And so I know what is the most frequent of those, what is the average of those, and what are the differences between them. And from that, we're able to share this information back to you to where you can take a look and see, you know what, my hourly rates might be a little low, might be a little high for the type of service that I'm providing. But again, it's all based on this anonymized aggregate data that's contributed by Clio customers. Oftentimes that data gives us actually more questions than answers. Why is somebody setting their billable rate at $20 an hour? So we have been supplementing our application data with surveys to both legal professionals and legal consumers, with this year's being based on over 2,000 different survey responses. And then lastly, we are using location data for a very unique portion of this year's report, where we take the aggregated and anonymized IP address data. So when people log into Clio, one of the things we check for a security perspective is, does the IP address of the device logging in match the location history of that law firm? So if you are an Iowa-based law firm, but suddenly somebody's logging in from Vietnam, that's a bit of a red flag. And our security team will immediately activate, dive in, and make sure that your account is as secure as possible, including possibly locking it down or contacting you to see if you're on vacation and having a great time in Vietnam. But that type of IP address data can actually give us some really interesting insight into where and how lawyers are working. That's the data that's in the Legal Trends Report. It's allowed us to have some really interesting conclusions over the years. And I want to run through those at a very high level quick before we jump into the 2022 report. In 2016, we actually in our first report, came up with the idea of the law firm funnel. And this is based on key performance indicators, or KPIs. And what we discovered is, looking at tens of thousands of law firms, that lawyers are actually billing a lot less than anybody realized. In our utilization rate, the very top number there, what we did was we divided the number of billable hours worked and recorded in Clio versus the number of work hours in the day. And surveys have told us that most lawyers are aiming for an 8-hour day. There are some days that are more, there are some weeks that are more, but 8 hours is where you're really trying to be. And what we found is that in 2016, lawyers had a utilization rate of 28%. Nearly 3/4 of their day was spent on non-billable work. They also had a realization rate of 81%. That's the number of billable hours invoiced. I recorded this hour of work versus the number of billable hours invoiced. I charged the client for this amount versus the number of billable hours worked. I recorded this. And what we found is lawyers are giving themselves a haircut at the realization rate. And so they're only really passing on about 80% of the work that they're doing to their client. And then lastly is collection rate. No matter how much of a haircut lawyers were giving themselves, when the client got a bill, they paid less. And in 2016, they were paying only 86 cents out of every dollar. And that led us to kind of this visualization of the lawyer day. You have your 8-hour day, but unfortunately only 2.2 hours of that were spent on billable work. You gave yourself that haircut, so 1.8 hours. And then lastly, your clients were only paying you for 1.5 hours per day. So a full 8-hour day meant that you were really not billing the potential. And it left us incredibly surprised on what are lawyers doing with their day? Where does this missing 6 hours go? So in 2017, we dug into that. What is happening to those missing 6 hours? Our hypothesis was that there's either too much time being eaten up by non-billable tasks, or there are not enough clients to support your billable targets. So when we asked lawyers, how are they spending their non-billable time? What we found is that lawyers divided their time across these categories, with 48% of their non-billable time being spent on administrative tasks. Office administration, generating and sending your bills, doing collections, right? Following up on clients who refuse to pay you. And 33% of your time was being spent on business development. I actually think that's a really reasonable amount of your day being spent on business development, but it's still eating time out of your ability to generate revenue with the cases that you have. And so we immediately started digging into how are lawyers doing business development and how are clients finding lawyers. And what they told us is that they are finding lawyers mostly from referrals from friends and family. Next was the use of the online search engine, and then referrals from another lawyer. And in every lawyer community that I'm a part of, I am constantly seeing some type of message post being like, hey, does anybody know a lawyer in Connecticut who can help with a probate case? Or does anybody know a lawyer in Montana who can help with a real estate deal? We actually do a lot of referrals as lawyers, but clients are relying upon both word of mouth and online searches to find a lawyer that works for them. And when they find a lawyer, this is what they were telling us they were looking for in 2017. Responds right away, offers free consults, offers fixed fees, and then lastly, we started taking a look at some specifics like lets clients pay by credit card, will text with you, or they have a great looking website. That one was less important. And as we get to the 22, we're going to see that kind of the appearances of law firms really do matter less to clients than we think. So taking a look at how clients were finding lawyers and what they're looking for, we asked, are lawyers focusing on those things? And we discovered that there's really this chasm between lawyers and clients' expectations. So in 2018, we took a look at what do lawyers think clients are feeling when they hire a lawyer. And as you can see here, there were a lot of really negative emotions that are being felt that lawyers think clients are feeling. But then when we asked clients that same question, what emotions are you feeling when you hire a lawyer? Yeah, there were a lot of those negative emotions, but I want to draw your attention to that biggest line, that 51%. Clients are feeling a lot of relief when they hire a lawyer. You are there to help, and they know that. But there's still this mismatch, this chasm between their expectations and a lot of what lawyers are doing. And in 2018, we really tried to quantify that. So we asked, how do clients want to interact with a lawyer? And we asked that question to both lawyers. How do your clients want to interact with you? And to the clients themselves. How do you want to interact with your lawyer? I'm just going to throw up a couple examples from 2018, but I really recommend you go back and read this one. When telling a lawyer all the facts or details about a situation, in that top bar, lawyers, 51% of them said that clients really want to share all this information via email. That red there. In the bottom bar, 70% of clients said they really want to have a conversation when telling all the facts or details about a situation. Huge mismatch between lawyers who think clients just want to put it all down in an email and clients themselves who are saying, I really want to talk to somebody face to face. And another example of that is learning about the legal aspects of their case. And so in this one, we see that lawyers thought that clients really want to learn about the legal aspects of their case. Yes, you have a case. Yes, here's how we're going to proceed on these kinds of things. Here's the law that applies. Lawyers felt pretty strongly that clients wanted to learn this either via email or phone. And in fact, the majority of clients, again, wanted an in-person conversation about learning the legal aspects of their case. So there's this mismatch when it comes to client expectations and lawyer expectations about clients. So are there firms that can deliver on client expectations? That's what we began researching in 2019. And what we found is that there were certain things that just really mattered most to clients. Even after we started this research in 2017, we found in 2019 that timely response is the most important factor when clients go out looking for law firms. The next couple of things, right, that a lawyer is easy to understand in their initial consultation or communication, that they give an understanding of the process, like here's what we're going to do, and that they're very clear about the next steps. Those are all important to clients as well, but that timely response continues to be the key predictor of whether or not they will hire a lawyer. In fact, 79% of clients told us that they wanted their lawyer to respond to an initial inquiry within 24 hours. So once we saw this, 79%, we realized we had to do some research. So we put 1,000 randomly selected law firms all across the US to the test. I personally generated 5 different initial inquiries on family law, a criminal defense attorney request, bankruptcy, employment, and business. And they all reached out to lawyers who identified themselves on their websites as handling one of these 5 issues. So if your law firm says, hey, we handle child custody cases, we sent you the family law inquiry. And these were not just Clio using law firms. Again, 1,000 randomly selected law firms who we emailed as a client saying, we want to hire you. What do you think happened? 60%, 600 of those law firms never responded at all. We were potentially a new client looking to hire them. We had a couple questions about the process, and they never, ever got back to us. Of those that responded, so now we're down to 400, only 29% of them provided a response that was timely, clear, and answered at least one question we asked in this short little paragraph of, hey, I'm looking for a lawyer to help me with this problem. Here are my 3 questions. Of those 400 law firms that responded, only two law firms actually hit every criteria in our test. They responded within 24 hours. They were professional and courteous, which I think that's got to be a low bar for us, guys. They were clear and easy to understand. They answered all the questions regarding the matter, like, yes, we handle this type of work, and the lawyer's ability to help. Yes, I have personally worked on these cases. They provided detailed information about what to expect in the process. Here, I want you to come in for a consult. Here's how you schedule it. These are the next steps that I need you to take and the documents that I need you to bring, anything like that. And they provided detailed information on not just the consultation, but some type of rate or cost. Like even if it's just the consultation, it'll be $100. That's what we were looking for as answering the question. Two law firms. We actually had almost 300 who just did not have a response that met anything at all. In fact, a good chunk of them were like, why don't you call us? Which was not a helpful client experience. So as we moved past 2019 into 2020, we saw that client expectations were sometimes not being met, but there were also new and additional challenges the law firms were facing. And we all know about the lockdowns that happened in 2020. So this immediately led us to publishing monthly updates on how law firms were faring as a part of our legal trends research. And what we were able to see over time, with 0% on this chart being the average 2019 performance of law firms, is that once those lockdowns happened, what we saw was that new matter creation dropped. And the revenue that came from those dropped as well. But there were a class of law firms who actually weathered this and excelled in comparison to a lot of the other law firms that were out there. And they were able to do so because they were utilizing three key aspects of Clio's technology. They were accepting credit cards and debit cards and online payments, electronic payments. They were using client portals to share and communicate with their clients. And they had some type of online intake to allow clients to really kind of kick off a new matter with them. And the amount of additional revenue that they were able to achieve was substantial. When we take a look at electronic payments in 2019, we were seeing well over $10,000 for each of these solutions. In 2020, once the lockdown started happening, the numbers jumped. And what we see is that for law firms that were using multiple solutions in 2020, they were earning close to $36,000 in additional revenue per lawyer. If you were a solo lawyer, you were actually earning even a lot more than this. It was almost $50,000. And so there are key technologies that not only enable you to meet those missed client expectations that we were talking about, but enable your law firm to excel. And so we wrote our founder, Jack Newton, wrote the Client-Centered Law Firm to really kind of help describe the client journey and where lawyers can be using a roadmap to help improve those client expectations. And it's another great resource that I recommend you take a look at. It's available on Amazon, and just grab it. But that brings us through the last 6 years of research up to the 2022 Legal Trends Report. We're going to go on a high-level version of this. So if you're looking for a lot more information, please use this QR code or this website URL to go and download the full copy of it. It's free and available to everybody. You don't have to be a Clio customer, but it will help you with your law firm. And that brings us now to our 2022 key metrics. Just like we looked at those key performance indicators for law firms all the way back in 2016, we have been tracking that and more for the last 7 years. And what we saw was that while business definitely had changed in 2020, it wasn't quite in the way that you think. Using, again, 2019 as kind of our baseline, back when things were normal for law firms, we saw something had happened that was really, quite frankly, extraordinary. We saw that lawyers were creating more and more new matters than they ever were. It was up 20%. Their billable hours that they were logging were up 35%. The hours that they then put on the bill was up 36%. And the amount of average revenue that they were collecting was at times 45% greater than it was in 2019. So law firms haven't just recovered from those closures of the pandemic, but they've grown. And on average, new matter creation is up 10% over 2019. And most law firms are collecting 31% more revenue than they were back in 2019. How is this possible with all the disruption and the craziness that we've seen for the last couple of years? That was what we asked as we started this research. Since 2016, we've been tracking the billable hourly index, and 83% of matters in Clio use an hourly rate. What we see is the average lawyer rate across the United States is currently set at $313. The blended rate, which is lawyers' rates and non-lawyers hourly rates blended together is $281 per hour. What's interesting about this is if we take a look at the consumer price index, which at the time of this research was around 8% inflation, we've seen for the first time ever that the consumer price index is now higher than the blended firm rate. So if you are doing the average increase in your hourly rate of about 4%, you're actually losing money now because you might be behind inflation on where things are. The other thing I do want to point out is the non-lawyer rate has finally started increasing. It hasn't since about 2012, but now we see the hourly rate is starting to go up above the 2012 rate that we've tracked, which I think is in part due to the need for skilled employees to really help out, and the fact that lawyers now have more access than ever to skilled employees anywhere they are. And that's going to be really important in just a bit. When we look at our key performance indicators, what we've seen is a really big jump in utilization rate at 33%. And that means that our 2021 lawyer funnel, where we had that 8 hours a day and lawyers had grown up to 2.4 hours a day of billed work and 1.6 hours collected at the very bottom, in 2022, we saw that jump to now over 2.5 hours billed and over 2 hours collected. It is the biggest jump in utilization rate that we've seen in the past 7 years. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, right? 2.4 to 2.6, 1.6 to 2 hours. When you think about the average hourly rate of a law firm, 2 extra hours of billing a week actually can become thousands of dollars in additional revenue over the year. And so that jump in utilization rate is what we think is responsible for the huge increase in both matters and revenue that are being undertaken by law firms. The big question is, how long is this going to last? Are we in a bit of a gold rush? Well, there are 2 possible solutions to this, and we're tracking these currently. The first is that we now know that lawyers are really starting to delegate their activities. All right, that's 6 hours a day that was being spent on both administrative tasks and business development. You guys have shrunk that, and you're either delegating those activities to people to handle them for you, or to technology like Clio to help you with a lot of them. But the other answer is that there might be a lot of pent-up demand for legal services or increased availability to funds to purchase legal services. And we want to make sure that lawyers know that this is a boom time, but that boom times may not always last. And so how can you prepare yourself both now in this boom time to handle it, but also afterwards? And that's what we're going to take a look at in our next 2 sections. The first of which is a desire for alternative payment methods. Clients are looking for a different way to pay for legal services. I'm going to tell you how. As we mentioned before, almost all law firms continue to offer hourly rates. It's actually used by 97% of law firms that use Clio, and 83% of the matters that are stored in Clio have hourly fees associated with them. But even lawyers believe that clients want a better payment solution when it comes to buying legal services. Lawyers believe that clients want it easier to pay them, right? Nobody wants to write a check anymore. Law firms should make it easier for clients. Lawyers don't want to handle checks either, and that lawyers need to be more flexible. So when we saw this data from lawyers, we then went and asked clients, like, really, how do you want to pay? And there are some interesting mismatches, again, between the lawyer's expectations and the clients. Obviously, clients are really interested in flat fees and lawyers buy into that, but I also think there's more desire for fees based on outcome. Now, you might think that means contingency fees, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Value-based billing, and there are lots of great blog posts on value-based billing and legal services, does talk about how saving time can lead to clients paying extra. As well as unbundled legal services is something that were highly desirable by clients as well. But I want to direct your attention all the way to the far right here, where we're taking a look at monthly subscriptions. Clients are really interested in coming up with some type of predictable ways of paying for legal services, And especially when we look at business clients, clients that are handling their own small business or working on behalf of a business, they're looking to kind of prepay for legal services and be able to stretch that cost out at a fixed amount across the year. And law firms that lean into that are actually being able to find more business and more predictable cash revenue when it comes to that. So transaction lawyers take a look at monthly subscription fees. And if you're a litigator, clients are definitely looking for that same type of predictability, but they understand that it might not be in advance, right? And so they're looking for being able to pay for things over time, like using payment plans. One of our bits of research earlier on found that at the time of the pandemic in 2020, only 53% of law firms were equipped to accept payment plans for outstanding invoices. They just didn't have the means to track them and implement them. So we just built that as a feature in Clio, that if you have an outstanding invoice now, you can actually have a payment plan with fixed payments that go straight to the client's credit card, debit card, or bank account, and pay that down over time automatically for you, and save that time that you were spending on collections so you can focus more on helping clients. So payment plans, highly desirable by clients. The other one that jumps out to me here on this page was the idea of legal insurance to cover unexpected legal costs. And there are some providers out there for legal insurance, but what I haven't seen is law firms starting to offer their own option for this. Basically, legal trust account banking, to where you can be depositing money over time to pay for future legal expenses. I think that's something that we should be researching as law firms and really leveraging as that. And lawyers who are using cloud-based technology like Clio, but not limited to that in this survey, were telling us that they should make it easier and they should be more flexible, and they're having the capacity to do this. So just like those firms that we talked about that were winning back in 2020, even though things were really disruptive, if you are using a cloud-based service like Clio, you have that ability to lean into these clients' expectations for alternative fees and do so in a way that has really little overhead in terms of like time and effort on behalf of that firm. It's that delegation we were talking about when it came to utilization rate. So with that in mind, all right, firms are delegating more than ever. Clients are looking for flexibility. Who's winning? That brings us to our last section. And interestingly, one of the first things we asked lawyers as a part of our 2022 survey was, are you interested in leaving your job, or have you left a job recently? At the time, we had been hearing a lot about what's called the Great Resignation, where people were really shuffling around, and lawyers were no different. We found that 19%, nearly 20% of lawyers had left a job in the past 12 months, and another 9% were looking to leave their job in the next 6 months. Nearly 30% of lawyers were looking to pack their bag and go. Why? We found that they were pretty evenly split between either better pay or better work-life balance. I don't think those are two different things, right? If I'm going to be hitting billable hourly targets that take me away from my friends and family, you better be paying me. And if you're not paying me, I better get my weekends off. So lawyers were leaving because of these two things in particular. We also see that they just weren't happy with their firm. It might be the firm itself, their manager, the type of work that they were doing. So maybe it was the practice area they didn't like. And only a small percentage were either relocating, retiring, or just taking time off. So we know that these lawyers, a third of lawyers out there, were taking a look at their law firm or the way that they're practicing law and deciding there was a better way, and we're making that happen. So what were the things that were kind of detracting from them? 59% of lawyers were telling us that they were working over 40 hours a week, and this was happening in two different ways. First, they were working longer days. So that increase in matters oftentimes led to an increase in actual work. And if we take a look at this chart, lawyers are telling us in the light blue when they would prefer to work, and then in the red when they're actually having to work, oftentimes exceeding that. And I think what's important here are the ends of this chart. what we see is there around 7 a.m., close to 20% of lawyers who are logging in early. And then we get to 6 p.m. and after, there's 20% of lawyers who are staying late. And it might not be the same 20%, but we know that this is happening, that lawyers are just working longer days than they want. And we also know that you're working more days of the week than you want. Again, same chart here. When you prefer to work in the dark purple, when are you actually working in the red? And what we see, especially on Friday, is that lawyers have a strong preference for some time off and unfortunately have to put in that time. And nearly half are doing so also on Saturday and nearly a third on Sunday. And lawyers are just doing this in part to catch up, we think. But when we talk to lawyers who weren't struggling with the amount of hours and the number of days that they're working, when they had gotten a handle on their schedule, right? And here we described a regular work week as just Monday to Friday, normal business hours. Those lawyers who had nailed that had better relationships with their clients, better relationships with their colleagues, a better feeling about their professional life, better feeling about their revenue contribution to their firm, as well as their mental and emotional wellness. They just felt better about themselves in the practice of law. They felt a little underpaid, but that's even there. And at the very bottom, this one stood out to me, they weren't satisfied with their time management. So I think that means, right, they're trying to pack it all in. And so they're leaving at the end of the day with something undone. But the flip side to that is that they were much healthier because of it. And that job satisfaction is just something that carries over if you can do it. Now, how are lawyers getting a handle on that? Well, 76% of lawyers tell us they want to choose which hours of the day that they work. They don't want to necessarily be 9 to 5, but they might want to be 8 to 4 or 9 to 3 and 6 to 9 later in the day. They want some flexibility because they need it during their day. And close to 50% of lawyers are telling us that they want to work from home. And interestingly, what we've seen in Clio's own data, remember that location data that we talked about before, that starting in 2020, there's been a huge shift in where lawyers are practicing law. So as an interesting experiment, we took a look at those IP addresses that I mentioned before, and they have a little marker in them that tells you a location. It's pretty broad. It's like the name of a town or a county, right? But if we saw a clustering of users on the same IP address per account, right? And we assumed that that was an office or shared work location. So if you're a firm of 5 lawyers all working together, if we saw that you were all using the same IP address at that time, we figured, okay, that must be your office. And we just aggregated that over and over. And what we found looking at our logs is that in 2020, the amount of time people spent in that assumed office just dropped, right? And has never recovered fully. Only 29% of lawyers are working exclusively from an office. And what I find very interesting is only 50% of non-lawyers now are working from an office. And in every back to work scenario we've seen from law firms, it's always the non-lawyers who go back first. But in Clio's data, it's still only 50% of the time are non-lawyers only working from their office. The law firm has now stretched to include non-shared locations. And in fact, we're seeing 4 different kind of approaches to utilizing offices now with Clio. And we do go into this a lot more within the legal trends report. So when you download it, you'll see a little bit more on all of these. But what we're seeing is there's a group that is only working in their office. This is the biggest group still, but we've seen now that there's the rise of mostly office, where people will come into work in the office, but they also have the flexibility to work from home sometimes. There are firms that are fully remote and they never come together. And then we have this hybrid, the bottom left here. And what I think is interesting about this is they used to be the mostly office crowd, but they've since flipped. And they now spend about a third of their time in the office, and the rest of their time they've dispersed. What we're hypothesizing here is that when they're actually practicing law and working, they're doing so not in the office. They're coming to the office for other tasks like team building activities or training, things where they might be meeting with clients in that face-to-face that we were talking about before. It's no longer the work product that's being generated in the office. That's being done elsewhere. And it's all the other stuff that's taking them to the office. And when I saw this flip, it actually reminded me of something called the technology adoption curve. And we know from this in a lot of software, the use of different technologies in other industries, that there's this early market of innovators and early adopters that try something new, and then it eventually jumps to the mainstream, where you have an early majority, a late majority, and laggards. Now, why is this important? Because if you're in that early market, the innovators and the early adopters, something very interesting happens. You end up controlling the market share. And so this dark purple line is the innovators, right? And while they adopt something, they're a little behind when it comes to the existing business models that are out there. But eventually, they take over market share. And what I think we're going to see happen is that law firms that adopt hybrid first approaches, yes, we have an office, but we use our office for specific things, and the rest of the time we're doing our work elsewhere. Those are going to attract lawyers who are interested in controlling the hours of day in which they work and having the option to work from home. They're going to be able to attract, hire, and retain the best people. And those best people are going to drive a market share of clients. How do we know this? Because we know that that same flexibility that the lawyers are looking for is also being sought by clients. 79% of them now tell us that working remotely with a lawyer is a key factor in hiring a firm. So it's not just beneficial to lawyers to be able to work from home, but from clients to also be able to interact with their lawyers, even if they're working from home. And so we dove into this. What else are you really looking for? What makes a law firm hireable? And we had 6 different categories that are listed here. And we asked people to kind of rate them from 1 to 100. So, and what we found is the one that was rated highest, 52 on average, was client reviews. People are now looking for proof that a law firm is a good law firm that's going to impact their hireability. But when we looked at things like locale, response time, they were still important, but not as important as client reviews. And definitely the office type, home or commercial, was not important at all. Let's do a little breakdown of this. When we looked at locale, it was about a 16% influence. 47% of clients told us that they want a lawyer in the same city, so just under half, which meant that just over half were okay with a lawyer not being in that city. In fact, 37% said the lawyer could just be anywhere in the same state, and 31% told us they were fine with the lawyer being anywhere so long as they had the authority and appropriate license to handle their problem. So if you are a lawyer who wants to move to Alaska but still help people in Missouri, there are about a third of clients out there that are totally fine with that if they can find you and hire you. And then when we asked about the office itself, like how important is it for them to have a fancy office? How important is it that they have a commercial office or a storefront if you are a small town lawyer? It was less than 1%. We're influenced by the office itself. Just like we saw earlier that having a super flashy website was not very important to clients. It's the same with the office. In fact, it was 0.07% were influenced by the office. And when we asked that group, did it matter if they had a commercial or home office as their primary office? It was practically tied. 51% preferred a commercial office, 49% were fine with a home office. And that meant that there are clients out there that align with the way lawyers now want to work, picking their hours, picking their location, just like lawyers want the ability to pick their hours and pick their locations. And so when we ask lawyers, is this the type of practice you want to have? 39% said they were fine meeting with colleagues virtually, and 45% said they were fine meeting with clients virtually. You can now build your perfect law firm. And interestingly, if you're picking software that enables this flexibility, what we see is firms that are picking cloud-based legal practice management solutions, just like lawyers who are able to control their regular work week, are much better off. when it came to relationships with clients, there was a 33% difference between firms that had that flexibility and firms that didn't. When it came to relationships with colleagues, a 22% difference. Even when we go all the way down to the bottom to salary, firms that were using cloud-based practice management solutions actually felt better about their salary. That one of the main reasons that lawyers were leaving jobs. And I think it's because they were able to get kind of a better work-life balance, but also it's simply a better law firm. Firms that were using cloud-based practice management solutions, and this question wasn't limited to Clio or Clio using law firms, just any cloud-based practice management solution, were telling us that they had greater client satisfaction, they had greater employee satisfaction with their law firm, they had greater employee performance, and they even had greater revenue by using these tools. So what we're seeing is that law firms that look towards flexibility on behalf of not just their clients and those missed client expectations that we'd seen in earlier legal trends reports, but also flexibility when it comes to how their own employees work are the new winning law firms in this new work era. So let's jump into some quick takeaways from the 2022 Legal Trends Report. It's a lot of information. If you only remember a couple of things, this should be the stuff that you should remember. One is your rates may be too low. We saw the consumer price index is now creeping up and may catch up to lawyer hourly billable rates. And if you're doing the average 4% over year increase, it actually may be too low. And so I recommend that you take a look at Clio's rate comparison tool, where you can pick your practice area, your state, and your role, lawyer or non-lawyer. So that way you can see if your rates are in line with, above, or below the average for your state and practice area and role. There's a QR code on this slide. You can just point your phone camera at it and we'll take you right to the website where you can do this calculation. And interestingly, right, if your rates are too low, will clients pay a higher rate? Obviously, this will depend upon both practice area and geography. But if you're leaning into alternative billing methods, we know that clients value that enough that they're willing to pay a higher rate. And so if you want to charge a client a higher hourly fee because they're going to be paying on a payment plan, as long as you meet the ethical requirements of a reasonable, well-communicated fee, do that. And clients will be willing to pay that higher hourly rate because they know they'll have that predictability on a monthly basis. Same with monthly subscriptions, right? If your average business client is paying you $5,000 some months and none the others, they'll be really happy to stretch that out. And it might add up to $6,000 with fixed payments, but they'll be fine with that predictability and the ability to budget just like you want to budget your business expenses. So your rates might be too low. Here's one way to bump them up. If you are creating that flexibility and leaning into those client expectations, don't worry. You can handle that increased demand. This is something that actually was in doubt in the past. We just didn't know if lawyers could handle more business. One of the issues with the billable hour is there's only 24 hours in the day, right? And lawyers can work themselves to the bone, and it's really disadvantageous to them. But what we're seeing is lawyers can handle increased demand in part because they're leaning into technology solutions and they're allowing that delegation of administrative tasks to either non-lawyer professionals or to technology solutions like Clio that can do the work for them. One of my favorite examples of this is not just payment plans, but there's a feature in Clio called outstanding balance. And if you've got a client that just has an outstanding balance, Clio will point that out to you and enable you to just quickly send an email communication with links to all of their outstanding amounts and a little button that just says pay here now, right? And so instead of spending 15% of your day on collections, it's now a 2-second email click and they just do that. We have automated billing reminders that do something similar, right? And so there are lots of different ways where you can delegate this in a way that is both ethically compliant and incredibly advantageous to both you, the law firm, and to your clients. And if you're able to do this delegation and get this flexibility, that means work-life balance, which is your goal, can be achievable. But the method is going to be a work-life blend. We no longer go to the office from 9 to 5 and focus solely on work, but instead we might have 7 to 6 with periods in between where we do laundry because we're working from home, or we go to the kids' ball game. And that work-life blend is what your employees and possibly you are looking for, which means that law firm leaders need to lean into providing a flexible working environment to not only attract, but to maintain top talent. And so you should be looking at your law firm not as a location, but a state of mind. How do I create a place where lawyers and our non-lawyer professionals can do their best work and then attract them and retain them? So flexibility on behalf of clients and of lawyers now means that the winning law firms in the future are cloud-first law firms. And so thank you again for getting insights of the 2022 Legal Trends Report. We've talked about a lot, but believe it or not, it's just scratching the surface of the whole report. So please go and download it now. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, anything that you'd like to follow there. I also have some further resources that might be helpful for a portion of the audience. We just published our 2023 Legal Trends Report for solo law firms. And so again, freely available to anybody. Go and download it now to get insights on how the needs of solo law firms are differing from those of larger law firms, and some really incredible insights into hourly rate, location of where you're working, and ways to improve solo law firms in specific tailored ways. And lastly, if you're interested in learning more about any of Clio's software offerings, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll have a poll on would you like a personalized demo of Clio? And I'd be remiss in wrapping this up without thanking the entire team behind the Clio Legal Trends Report. While I get to be the person who talks about it, there's a whole team of people who work in the background to make this report possible. And I cannot thank them enough for being a part of this. And lastly, I want to thank you, Jeff, for having me come and talk about the Clio Legal Trends Report. And I'm really happy to now work with you to answer questions from your audience. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Joshua. That was a fascinating presentation, and that data is really incredible. Like Clio, Lexbe enables the cloud-first law firm and all of the advantages that delivers. Many of the law firms that come to us are in a situation where they're rapidly being overwhelmed by not only the massive increase in digital evidence in their cases, but also the number of digital sources that they're having to deal with. And they also were desperately in search of a solution that would allow them to continue to work in the case, whether they're at home or in the office or whatever location they needed to work from. A lot of the common issues that we hear all the time are, I don't have time to build my case, or I'm afraid of being outgunned by opposing counsel, or we don't have the technical ability to handle this data, or we have limited e-discovery budgets. This case involves millions of documents and is swamping us. And we have a small staff and would prefer to keep e-discovery in-house if possible and not have to outsource it. Well, at Lexbe, we help solve these issues. We help legal teams with limited resources successfully handle those document-intensive matters. First, because we're faster, our cloud-based e-discovery platform auto-scales to handle terabytes of documents at lightning speeds. This means you get from document ingestion to document review faster and have the time you need to build a strong case. Secondly, we're more affordable. We pass the cost savings of our technological advancements on to clients. We don't charge for processing. We don't have any data promotion fees, no user fees, no case fees, no electronic endorsement fees. Our subscription plans start at just $4.25 per gig per month for hosting, and with longer terms or larger sets of data, there are discounts available for that. Third, you can have as many users in the Lexbe Discovery platform that you need. We offer free training so the lawyers and paralegals on your team can collaborate and build your strongest case. Lastly, Lexbe equips you with advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms that perform a wide range of functions like language translation, audio file transcription, entity detection, sentiment analysis, cognitive image recognition, predictive coding, near duplication groupings, and color-coded document comparison, to name a few. So we're faster, more affordable, and easier to use. David Jones was concerned that he would be outgunned by his AmLaw opposition. He quickly realized that Lexbe was a great equalizer and helped him build his best case that delivered a winning verdict. Paige Tackett at Thompson Co. needed Lexbe's speed to get productions out the door to meet deadlines. Lexbe is lightning fast and gets you from document ingestion to productions faster. And Patrick Biggins needed an easy-to-use e-discovery platform to handle document-intensive cases for a boutique law firm. Lexbe got him onboarded fast and provided the support they needed to build a strong case. And with that, I'll ask our next polling question. Would you like a demonstration of the Lexbe e-discovery platform? All right, we've got a few more answers coming in. And I'll go ahead and close that polling question. At Lexbe, we also provide comprehensive remote and on-site forensic collections that are fully defensible. We utilize industry-leading tools like Cellebrite and Magnet. We handle a wide range of devices and account types, as you can see on this partial list. Since the pandemic, we've seen a large uptick in transcription requirements and transcribing web conferences, making that fully searchable. We've also seen an increase in mobile device collections because it's really been the hub of productivity for mobile connected employees that are working from anywhere or working from home. And now I'd like to ask our final polling question. Do you have a forensic collection project, and would you like a complimentary consult? While you're answering that, I'd like to thank you for attending today's session. We'll be making the following available to webinar attendees: a recorded streaming version, an MP3 podcast, as well as a PDF. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments about this webinar or suggestions for future topics. This webinar is part of the Lexbe Discovery webinar series. For notices of future live and on-demand webinars as part of this series, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Also, we'd like your advice regarding our webinar series. Please complete the survey at the end of today's session. It helps us to continuously improve this program and cover the topics that are most important and relevant to you. And with that, I'd like to thank Joshua for presenting today, and thank you for attending. Watch your inbox for an invite to our next webinar on best practices in e-discovery and digital forensics. Take care.